The flash of cameras erupted like lightning across the grand Victorian facade of the Royal Albert Hall as two familiar figures stepped from their sleek black vehicle. In that single moment, the world held its breath. For the first time in over 2 years, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had returned to British soil together, not for a family obligation or royal duty, but for something entirely unexpected. Their presence at this iconic venue, where history had witnessed everything from the Beatles' final concert to Churchill's wartime speeches, would spark conversations across continents and reignite debates that many thought had been settled. What brought them back? What message were they sending to the royal family, to the British public, and to the millions who had followed their journey from fairy tale wedding to dramatic departure? As the couple walked hand in hand toward the hall's imposing entrance, their confident strides suggested this was no accidental appearance. This was a statement. This was their moment to rewrite the narrative on their own terms. The evening that followed would become one of the most talked about events of the year, setting in motion a chain of events that would forever change how the world viewed the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, and perhaps how they viewed themselves. The autumn evening air carried a crisp bite as London prepared for what many thought would be an ordinary Tuesday night at the Royal Albert Hall. The venue, with its distinctive red brick dome reaching toward the darkening sky, stood ready to host a charity gala for mental health awareness. Inside, 500 of Britain's most influential figures took their seats, unaware that they were about to witness something extraordinary. Sarah Mitchell, a veteran royal correspondent for the BBC, had arrived early to cover what she expected would be a routine event, featuring minor celebrities and wealthy philanthropists. She positioned herself near the entrance, her camera crew setting up their equipment with practiced efficiency. The guest list had been thoroughly vetted weeks in advance, and nothing suggested this evening would be anything more than another worthy cause gathering the usual suspects of British high society. At exactly 7:30, as the first guests began arriving in their evening wear, a commotion started building outside. Sarah noticed her phone buzzing with frantic messages from her editor. Social media was exploding with rumors that had seemed impossible just moments before. Multiple sources were reporting that a private jet had landed at Heathrow with a flight plan that originated from California, more specifically, from the area near Montecito, where the Duke and Duchess of Sussex had made their home. The couple had not been seen together on British soil since the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations over 2 years ago. Their last joint appearance in the UK had been carefully orchestrated, limited to specific royal events, and surrounded by tension that was palpable, even to casual observers. Since then, their public statements about the royal family had created what many described as an unbridgeable gulf. Harry's memoir had revealed intimate family details that shocked the world, while Meghan's interviews had painted a picture of an institution struggling to modernize and embrace diversity. As Sarah processed this information, her photographer James grabbed her arm. His practiced eye had spotted something that made his pulse quicken. 3 black Range Rovers were approaching the venue, their tinted windows making it impossible to see inside. This was not the typical arrival pattern for ordinary guests. The vehicles moved with the precision and coordination that only came with serious security details. The first car stopped directly in front of the main entrance. 2 men in dark suits emerged, their eyes scanning the growing crowd with professional intensity. These were clearly protection officers, their movements betraying years of training in close personal protection. They positioned themselves strategically, one near the vehicle, the other surveying the wider area where photographers and curious onlookers had begun to gather. From the second vehicle, a woman stepped out. She was tall, elegant, wearing a navy coat that complemented her dark hair, which was styled in a way that managed to look both sophisticated and approachable. Even from a distance, Sarah recognized her immediately. Meghan Markle moved with the confidence of someone who had learned to navigate public attention, but there was something different about her posture tonight. She seemed more relaxed than Sarah remembered from their previous encounters. The third vehicle's door opened, and Prince Harry emerged. He wore a dark suit that fit perfectly, his red hair slightly tousled by the evening breeze. His beard was neatly trimmed, and his expression was one Sarah had not seen in years. There was no tension in his shoulders, no reluctance in his movements. Instead, he appeared genuinely pleased to be there, greeting the protection officers with familiar nods that suggested these were people he knew and trusted. The couple came together naturally, Harry taking Meghan's hand as they prepared to walk toward the entrance. This simple gesture, captured by dozens of cameras, would later be analyzed frame by media outlets around the world. Their body language spoke of a partnership that had weathered significant storms and emerged stronger. They moved in sync, their steps matching perfectly as they approached the building that had hosted British cultural events for over 150 years. As they walked, Harry paused to acknowledge a group of veterans who had gathered near the entrance. These men and women, some in wheelchairs, others using walking aids, had come to support the evening's cause. Harry's military background had always made such encounters meaningful to him, but tonight there was an extra warmth in his interactions. He shook hands, exchanged a few words, and listened intently when an elderly man began telling him about his own struggles with mental health after military service. Meghan, meanwhile, spoke quietly with a young woman who had approached tentatively. The woman appeared nervous, clutching a small notebook, and Meghan immediately put her at ease, with a genuine smile and focused attention. This was the Meghan that many Americans had come to admire during her acting career and early royal duties. Approachable, warm, and genuinely interested in connecting with people, rather than simply fulfilling obligations. Inside the hall, news of their arrival was spreading like wildfire. Guests who had been settling into their seats suddenly became animated, pulling out phones to text friends and family. The organizers of the event, a respected mental health charity called Mind Forward, had been completely unaware that the Duke and Duchess would attend. Their names were not on any guest list, they had not been sent formal invitations, and their security team had not coordinated with the venue in advance. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, the charity's director, found herself in the unusual position of welcoming two of the world's most famous people to an event she had planned without them in mind. A composed woman in her 50s who had spent decades working in mental health advocacy, she nonetheless felt her pulse quicken as she realized the implications of their presence. The evening's fundraising goals, already ambitious, would now likely be exceeded beyond her wildest expectations. The venue itself seemed to come alive with their presence. The Royal Albert Hall had witnessed countless historic moments, from Winston Churchill's speeches during World War II to the legendary concerts of the 1960s and 70s. Tonight, it would add another chapter to its storied history. The circular auditorium, with its distinctive red and gold color scheme, provided an intimate setting despite its capacity for over 5,000 people. Tonight's gathering was much smaller, but the energy was building to something extraordinary. As Harry and Meghan took their seats, not in a royal box or special area, but in regular seats among the other guests, conversations throughout the hall began to shift. People who had come to support mental health awareness suddenly found themselves part of a much larger story. Social media feeds began filling with photos and videos hastily taken on phones, showing the couple settling in like any other attendees. Their choice of seating sent its own message. By sitting among the general attendees rather than in a place of honor, they were making a statement about their current status and their relationship to formal royal protocol. They were there as private citizens, supporting a cause they cared about, not as representatives of the monarchy. This distinction, subtle but significant, would not be lost on royal watchers and protocol experts. The evening's program began with Dr. Project Hartwell taking the stage to welcome everyone and explain the importance of the work Mind Forward was doing in communities across Britain. As she spoke about the continuing stigma surrounding mental health issues, particularly among young people, she could hardly believe that her words were now reaching not just the 500 people in the hall, but potentially millions around the world, through the media attention the Sussex presence had generated. When the lights dimmed for the first presentation, a short film about the charity's work, Harry and Meghan watched intently. The film featured interviews with young people who had struggled with depression, anxiety, and other mental health challenges. Their stories were powerful and raw, speaking to experiences that transcended social class, wealth, or fame. Several people in the audience were visibly moved, and when the lights came up, there was a moment of respectful silence before the applause began. During the intermission, the couple mingled freely with other guests. They were approached by numerous people, each interaction carefully observed by the media present. What struck many observers was how natural these conversations appeared. There was no formality, no protocol being followed, just genuine human connections being made around shared concerns for mental health advocacy. One particularly moving moment came when Harry spoke with a teenager named Marcus, who had travelled from Birmingham with his mother to attend the event. Marcus had struggled with severe depression following his father's death and had found help through one of Mind Forward's programs. His mother watched tearfully as Harry listened to her son's story, offering words of encouragement and sharing his own experiences with grief and mental health challenges. As the evening continued, it became clear that this was not a carefully planned public relations exercise. The spontaneous nature of their interactions, the genuine emotion in their responses, and their obvious knowledge of mental health issues suggested a deep personal commitment to the cause. This was not about rebuilding their public image or sending messages to the royal family. This was about using their platform to support something they truly cared about. The first part of what would become a remarkable evening was drawing to a close. But already it was clear that this night would be remembered long after the last guest had gone home. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex had returned to Britain on their own terms, for their own reasons, and their presence was creating ripples that would extend far beyond the walls of the Royal Albert Hall. The second half of the evening began with what organizers had planned as the highlight, a keynote speech from Professor James Wellington, a renowned psychiatrist whose research on trauma and recovery had influenced mental health treatment worldwide. As Dr. Paulbert, Hartwell took the stage to introduce him. Her phone buzzed with an urgent message from her assistant. Professor Wellington had fallen seriously ill during dinner and was being rushed to hospital. The evening's main event had suddenly vanished. Dr. Hartwell felt her stomach drop as she processed this news while standing at the podium, 500 expectant faces looking up at her. She had 2 minutes to figure out how to salvage what had been shaping up to be the charity's most successful fundraising event ever. Her mind raced through options. She could give an impromptu speech herself, ask one of the other experts in attendance to step up, or simply announce the change and hope people would understand. Then, something extraordinary happened. From the audience, she saw movement. Prince Harry was standing, his hand gently on Meghan's shoulder as they exchanged a few quiet words. He looked toward the stage, caught Dr. Hartwell's eye, and gave her a slight nod. She stared at him for a moment, hardly believing what she thought she was seeing. He was offering to speak. Dr. Hartwell's professional composure nearly cracked. In 30 years of organizing events, she had never faced such a situation. The Duke of Sussex was volunteering to give an impromptu keynote address at a mental health charity event. She managed a small nod back to him, her heart pounding as she watched him begin making his way toward the aisle. The audience noticed the movement immediately. Conversations died away as people realized what was happening. Harry moved through the hall with quiet confidence, pausing occasionally to exchange words with people he passed. Meghan remained in her seat, but her proud smile was visible to those nearby. She understood better than anyone what this moment meant to her husband. As Harry reached the side of the stage, Dr. Hartwell made a quick decision that would be talked about for years to come. She stepped back to the microphone and said simply, "Ladies and gentlemen, due to an unexpected illness, Professor Wellington cannot be with us tonight. However, we are extraordinarily fortunate to have someone here who has shown tremendous courage in speaking openly about mental health challenges. Please welcome Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex." The applause that followed was unlike anything the Royal Albert Hall had heard in recent memory. It was not the polite, measured applause typical of formal events. This was genuine appreciation, mixed with surprise and anticipation. People rose to their feet spontaneously, creating a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 minutes. Harry paused at the bottom of the stage steps, clearly moved by the response. When he finally reached the podium, Harry stood quietly for a moment, looking out at the audience. He had not prepared remarks. There were no notes in his pocket, no speech written by communications professionals. What followed would come entirely from his heart and his experience. "Thank you," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's excellent acoustics. "I certainly did not expect to be standing here tonight, but sometimes the most important conversations happen when we least expect them." His opening drew nervous laughter from the audience, breaking the ice and establishing an immediate connection. "Dr. Hartwell told me backstage that tonight is about breaking down the barriers that prevent people from seeking help when they need it most. She is right, but I want to talk about something slightly different. I want to talk about the barriers we create for ourselves, the ones that convince us we are not worthy of help, or that asking for support somehow makes us weak." He paused, scanning the faces in the audience. Many were leaning forward, hanging on his words. This was not the formal, carefully crafted speaking style associated with royal addresses. This was personal, immediate, and real. For years, I believed that my struggles did not matter because others had it worse. I told myself that I had no right to feel lost or broken because I had privileges that millions of people could only dream of. This thinking nearly destroyed me. The honesty in his voice was stunning. Even the most cynical royal watchers in the audience found themselves drawn in by his authenticity. "When I lost my mother, I was 12 years old. For the next 20 years, I convinced myself that I was fine. I threw myself into the army, into my royal duties, into anything that would keep me from sitting still long enough to feel the pain I was carrying. I thought that was strength. I thought that was what was expected of me." The hall was completely silent now. Even the photographers had stopped taking pictures, caught up in the power of his words. Harry's military service was well known, but he had never spoken so openly about how he had used it to avoid dealing with his grief. It took me far too long to realize that grief does not follow a timeline. Trauma does not respect your schedule or your responsibilities. Mental health struggles do not care about your job title, your bank account, or what others expect of you. They simply exist and they demand to be acknowledged. Dr. Hartwell watched from the side of the stage, tears in her eyes. In her decades of mental health advocacy, she had never heard someone in such a public position speak with this level of vulnerability and truth. Harry was not giving a speech. He was bearing witness to his own journey in a way that gave permission for others to do the same. The breakthrough for me came when I finally understood that seeking help was not a sign of weakness, but the strongest thing I could do. Not just for myself, but for the people who loved me and whom I loved in return. His eyes found Megan in the audience, and for a moment their connection was visible to everyone present. My wife taught me something invaluable. She showed me that vulnerability is not the opposite of strength, it is the foundation of it. When we pretend to be okay when we are not, when we smile through pain that is eating us alive, when we soldier on because we think we have to, we are not protecting anyone. We are simply postponing the inevitable reckoning with our own humanity. The audience was completely absorbed now. This was not celebrity confession or publicity stunt. This was a man sharing hard-won wisdom about survival and healing. Several people in the audience were visibly emotional, recognizing their own struggles in his words. I want to tell you about a moment that changed everything for me. It was 3 years ago, and I was sitting in a therapist's office in California. I had been in therapy for months at that point, but I was still holding back, still trying to control the narrative of my own healing. My therapist looked at me and said something I will never forget. Your pain is not a performance. It does not need to be eloquent or convenient or socially acceptable. It just needs to be acknowledged. Harry's voice caught slightly on these words, and he paused to collect himself. The vulnerability of this moment, witnessed by hundreds in the hall and millions watching around the world, would become one of the most powerful examples of public emotional honesty in recent memory. That night I called my brother, he continued, and a ripple of surprise went through the audience. Harry had not spoken publicly about his relationship with Prince William in positive terms for months. I told him I was struggling, really struggling, not with royal duties or media pressure, but with the fundamental question of who I was when everything else was stripped away. The admission hung in the air, like a bridge being built in real time. Harry was revealing not just his own struggles, but hinting at family relationships that the media had declared irreparably damaged. William listened. He did not try to fix me or offer easy solutions. He just listened. And then he said something our mother used to tell us when we were children. Being brave does not mean you are not afraid. It means you do the right thing even when you are terrified. By now, there was hardly a dry eye in the hall. Harry had transformed what was meant to be a keynote address into something approaching a masterclass in emotional intelligence and human connection. He was demonstrating exactly what mental health advocacy should look like: honest, compassionate, and utterly without pretense. I share this not because my story is special, but because it is not. Every person in this room tonight has struggled with something. Every person watching this has felt lost or broken or afraid. The difference is not whether we experience these things. The difference is whether we allow ourselves to seek the help and connection we need to heal. He looked around the hall, making eye contact with as many people as possible. The young man I met tonight, Marcus, told me about losing his father. He said the hardest part was not the grief itself, but feeling like he had to hide it to protect other people. That broke my heart, because I recognized myself in his words. How many of us are carrying pain we think we have no right to feel? The question was rhetorical, but its impact was profound. Harry had articulated something many people felt but had never heard expressed so clearly. The isolation that comes not just from struggle, but from feeling unable to acknowledge that struggle openly. Mind Forward and organizations like it exist to remind us that we are not alone. They create spaces where our struggles can be spoken aloud without judgment, where our healing can happen at our own pace, where our humanity is more important than our function in society. As he spoke about the charity, Dr. Hartwell realized that Harry understood their work at a deep level. He was not speaking in generalities or offering hollow praise. He clearly knew what mental health organizations actually did and why they mattered. I want to close with a request, Harry said, his voice growing stronger as he reached his conclusion. Tonight, when you go home, I want you to check in with someone you care about. Not with a casual, "How are you?" that expects a casual, "Fine" in response, but with a real question, "How are you really doing?" And then listen to the answer. Really listen. The silence that followed was profound. Harry had given them not just a speech, but a call to action that was both simple and revolutionary. He was asking them to practice the kind of authentic human connection that could prevent mental health struggles from becoming mental health crises. And if someone asks you that question, he continued, try to answer honestly, not perfectly, not eloquently, but honestly. Because your honesty might give someone else permission to be honest too. And that is how we begin to heal, not just as individuals, but as a society. When Harry finished speaking, the applause that erupted was thunderous. But more than that, it felt transformative. People were not just clapping for a good speech, they were responding to an experience that had changed something fundamental about the evening, and perhaps about themselves. As Harry left the stage, many in the audience remained standing, not ready to let the moment end. Hartwell returned to the podium, but struggled to find words adequate to follow what they had all just witnessed. Finally, she simply said, I think we have all been reminded tonight why this work matters so much. The evening's fundraising, which had already exceeded expectations due to the Sussex presence, now reached levels that Dr. Hartwell had never imagined possible. But more importantly, the conversation about mental health had been elevated in a way that would have lasting impact far beyond one charity gala. As guests began to mingle during the final reception, the atmosphere in the hall had completely transformed. People were having deeper conversations, sharing more personal stories, and connecting in ways that the earlier part of the evening had not facilitated. Harry's speech had given everyone permission to be more authentic, and the result was exactly what mental health advocates dream of: real human connection replacing polite social interaction. The second part of this remarkable evening was ending, but its impact was just beginning to be felt. As the formal portion of the evening concluded, and guests began gathering in the hall's elegant reception area, the atmosphere remained charged with the emotional intensity of Harry's impromptu speech. The circular corridors of the Royal Albert Hall, with their distinctive Victorian architecture and historical portraits, had witnessed many significant moments. But tonight felt different. Conversations were deeper, more personal, and filled with the kind of authentic connection that Harry had challenged everyone to embrace. Dr. Hartwell moved through the crowd, still processing what had happened. Her phone had not stopped buzzing with messages from colleagues, media contacts, and donors around the world who were already hearing about the evening through social media. The hashtag #RealConversations was trending globally, and video clips of Harry's speech were being shared millions of times. What had started as a modest charity fundraiser had become an international moment of mental health advocacy. Near the main entrance, Meghan was engaged in conversation with a group of young mental health advocates who had travelled from various parts of the UK to attend the event. Her background in advocacy work was evident as she listened intently to their stories and offered thoughtful responses. She had clearly done her homework, demonstrating detailed knowledge of current mental health initiatives and the challenges facing young people in accessing appropriate care. One of the advocates, a 23-year-old woman named Claire from Manchester, was describing her experience with postpartum depression following the birth of her daughter. Meghan listened without interruption, occasionally nodding with the kind of understanding that suggested personal familiarity with the struggles being described. When Claire finished, Meghan shared her own challenges with mental health during her pregnancy and the difficulty of seeking help while living under intense public scrutiny. The hardest part was not knowing if what I was feeling was normal or if I was failing somehow, Meghan said quietly. When you are supposed to be grateful and happy, admitting that you are struggling feels like betraying everyone's expectations of you. This level of personal disclosure from someone in Meghan's position was extraordinary. She was not speaking as a duchess or a celebrity, but as a mother, sharing common ground with another mother. The young women around her were visibly moved, several nodding in recognition of similar feelings. Meanwhile, Harry had been approached by a distinguished older gentleman who introduced himself as Sir David Morrison, a retired general who had served alongside Harry during his military career. The reunion was warm but carried an undertone of complexity, given the public criticism Harry had faced from some military figures regarding his departure from royal duties and subsequent public statements. Your speech tonight reminded me of something, Sir David said, his voice carrying the authority of decades in military leadership. Do you remember that conversation we had in Afghanistan about leadership under pressure? Harry smiled, clearly recalling the memory. You told me that the strongest leaders are the ones who admit when they do not have all the answers.
Exactly. And tonight, you demonstrated exactly that kind of leadership.
You showed that admitting vulnerability takes more courage than pretending to be invulnerable. Sir David's endorsement was significant, representing a bridge between Harry's military past and his current advocacy work. Their conversation was interrupted by commotion near the hall's main entrance. A small crowd had gathered, and the energy felt different from the warm, intimate atmosphere that had characterized most of the evening. Dr. Hartwell looked toward the disturbance and felt her heart sink as she recognized what was happening. Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, had arrived unannounced. The Queen's only daughter was known for her no-nonsense approach to royal duties and her complex relationship with media attention. Her presence at an event where her nephew and his wife were making their first major public appearance together in Britain created an instant undercurrent of tension. Protocol officials who had not been needed all evening suddenly appeared, trying to navigate a situation that no one had anticipated. Princess Anne moved through the crowd with her characteristic brisk efficiency, acknowledging greetings but clearly focused on a specific destination. She was heading directly toward Harry and Meghan. The hall seemed to hold its collective breath as royal watchers and media representatives realized they were about to witness the first face-to-face encounter between these family members since the Queen's funeral. The atmosphere shifted palpably as conversations died away and people positioned themselves to observe what would happen next. Harry saw his aunt approaching, and his posture straightened slightly. Meghan, who had been mid-conversation with the mental health advocates, turned as she sensed the change in energy around them. For a moment, the three members of the royal family stood in a triangle of uncertainty, each waiting to see how the others would react. Princess Anne spoke first, her voice carrying clearly despite the surrounding crowd. "Harry, Meghan." Her tone was neutral but not unfriendly, suggesting careful calculation rather than spontaneous emotion. "Aunt Anne," Harry replied, offering a slight bow that struck a balance between family affection and formal respect. "We did not know you were planning to attend tonight." "I was not," Princess Anne said with characteristic directness. "But when I heard about your speech, I felt it was important to be here." She paused, her eyes moving between Harry and Meghan. "Mental health advocacy has been important work for our family for many years." The implicit reference to the royal family's mental health initiatives could have been interpreted as territorial, but something in Princess Anne's delivery suggested otherwise. She seemed to be acknowledging Harry's speech as legitimate family business rather than challenging his right to speak on the topic. "We are proud to support Mind Forward's work," Meghan said, stepping slightly closer to Harry in a subtle show of unity. "Their community-based approach is making a real difference." Princess Anne nodded approvingly. "Dr. Hartwell briefed me on their programs. Practical, evidence-based, focused on results rather than publicity." The compliment was delivered in Anne's typical style, praise embedded within implied criticism of less substantial efforts. What happened next surprised everyone present, including the royal protection officers, who were trying to maintain appropriate security while allowing the family interaction to proceed naturally. Princess Anne turned to address the small crowd that had gathered around them. "I want to say something publicly, if I may," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding attention. The crowd quieted immediately, sensing the significance of the moment. "Tonight, I have heard my nephew speak with remarkable honesty about struggles that many people face, but few discuss openly. This took considerable courage." She looked directly at Harry as she spoke. Mental health advocacy requires exactly this kind of authenticity. It cannot be done effectively from a distance or through carefully crafted statements. It requires personal investment and genuine understanding. The endorsement from Princess Anne, known for her skepticism of publicity and her insistence on substance over style, carried enormous weight. She was essentially legitimizing Harry's advocacy work in front of an audience that included significant media representation. But she was not finished. "I also want to acknowledge the work that Meghan has done in this area, both during her time as a working member of our family and in her current endeavors. Mental health does not respect borders or titles. The work matters more than where it is done or who gets credit for it."
This public acknowledgement of Meghan's contributions was extraordinary coming from Princess Anne, who had remained largely silent about the Sussex departure and its aftermath.
She was choosing to focus on their shared commitment to mental health rather than the controversies that had dominated headlines. Harry and Meghan exchanged a glance that suggested they were as surprised as everyone else by this development. The evening had already exceeded their expectations in terms of positive reception, but Princess Anne's public support added a dimension they had not anticipated.
"Thank you," Harry said simply, his voice carrying genuine emotion.
"Family support means everything when you are trying to do work that matters." "Family is not just about blood relations," Princess Anne replied, looking at both Harry and Meghan. "It is about shared values and mutual respect. Tonight has demonstrated both." The conversation continued for several more minutes, focusing on the practical aspects of mental health advocacy and the challenges of reaching communities that were traditionally underserved. Princess Anne's questions were detailed and specific, suggesting she had done considerable homework before arriving. Her engagement was clearly professional rather than merely ceremonial. Dr. Hartwell watched this family interaction with fascination and growing hope. If the royal family could demonstrate this kind of unity around mental health advocacy, the impact could be transformative. The combination of Harry and Meghan's contemporary approach with Princess Anne's institutional credibility created possibilities that none of them could achieve individually. As the conversation wound down, Princess Anne made one final statement that would be remembered long after the evening ended. Mental health advocacy is not a competition. There is more than enough work to be done, and we are all stronger when we work together rather than separately. With that, she nodded to Harry and Meghan, acknowledged Dr. Hartwell with professional courtesy, and began making her way through the crowd toward the exit. Her visit had lasted less than 30 minutes, but its impact was profound. The remaining guests watched her departure with a mix of awe and speculation. Princess Anne's appearance had transformed the evening from a story about the Sussexes returning to Britain into something much more significant, a demonstration of royal family unity around an issue that transcended their personal differences. As the crowd began to disperse and conversations resumed, it was clear that the third part of this remarkable evening had added layers of complexity and possibility that no one had anticipated. The relationships, tensions, and potential for collaboration that had been revealed would continue to influence royal family dynamics and mental health advocacy for years to come. The night was far from over, and the most surprising developments were yet to come. The evening was winding down when Harry felt his phone vibrate in his jacket pocket. Most guests had departed, leaving only a small group of charity organizers, close supporters, and a few lingering media representatives. The Royal Albert Hall's grand interior, which had been buzzing with energy hours earlier, now felt intimate and quiet, almost sacred in the aftermath of such an emotionally charged event. Harry glanced at the caller ID and froze. The screen displayed a name he had not expected to see tonight, or perhaps ever again in such circumstances: William. His brother, the Prince of Wales, was calling him directly, not through private secretaries, not through official channels, but person to person. Harry stepped away from the small group, where Meghan was still engaged in conversation with Dr. Packard. Hartwell about potential future collaborations, seeking privacy for what could be one of the most important conversations of his life. William, Harry answered, his voice carefully neutral despite the emotional turbulence he felt. Harry. His brother's voice carried a weight that Harry recognized immediately. This was not a casual call. I watched your speech tonight. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. William's acknowledgement that he had been following Harry's activities, despite their estranged relationship, revealed more than a simple statement of fact. It suggested an ongoing connection that transcended their public silence. I did not know you were watching, Harry replied honestly. He had not seen any indication that members of the royal family were monitoring the event, but then again, he realized, they would not announce such interest publicly. Catherine made me watch, William said, and Harry detected something that might have been a smile in his brother's voice. She said your appearance was trending worldwide and that I needed to see what you said about mental health. She was right. The mention of Catherine, the Princess of Wales, was significant. Harry's relationship with his sister-in-law had been one of the casualties of the Sussex departure, with public statements and media speculation, creating what seemed like an unbridgeable gulf. Yet here was William suggesting that Catherine had actively encouraged him to engage with Harry's work. What did you think? Harry asked, genuinely uncertain whether he wanted to hear the answer. William was quiet for a long moment, and Harry could hear the sounds of what seemed like a family environment in the background. Children's voices, perhaps the television, normal domestic life continuing around this extraordinary conversation. I think you were braver tonight than I have been in years, William said finally. The things you said about grief, about feeling like we had no right to struggle because of our privilege. Harry, I have felt exactly the same things, but I have never been able to say them publicly. Harry felt his breath catch. In all their years of growing up together, through their mother's death, their military service, their royal duties, William had never acknowledged their shared emotional struggles so directly. Their conversations had always been practical, focused on duties and responsibilities, carefully avoiding the deeper currents of pain and confusion they both carried. Why not? Harry asked gently. Because I am going to be king, William replied, with a mixture of resignation and frustration. Because every word I say is analyzed for constitutional implications. Because I am supposed to be the stable one. The one who never wavers or shows doubt. Sometimes I feel like I am disappearing inside that expectation. This was the most personal conversation they had shared in years, and it was happening over the phone while Harry stood in a corridor of the Royal Albert Hall, having just delivered the most honest speech of his life. The timing felt both random and inevitable. "You know what the ironic part is?" Harry said, leaning against the wall and closing his eyes. "Tonight, speaking about our struggles, our grief, our need for help, I felt more royal than I have felt in years. Not because of titles or protocol, but because I was using whatever platform I have to try to help people." William was quiet again, and Harry wondered if he had pushed too far, said too much. Their relationship had been fractured by exactly these kinds of differences in perspective about duty, service, and authenticity. "Harry, I need to tell you something," William said, his voice becoming more formal. "Father is watching too." Harry's stomach dropped. King Charles III had been largely silent about Harry's various public appearances and statements since the coronation. Their relationship, always complex, had become virtually non-existent in any meaningful sense. The idea that his father was actively monitoring tonight's events felt both encouraging and terrifying. "Is he angry?" Harry asked, defaulting to a childhood fear that felt ridiculous but remained powerful. "No," William said, and Harry could hear surprise in his own brother's voice. "He is proud. He called me right before I called you. He said your speech reminded him of Mother, of her ability to connect with people authentically about difficult subjects." The comparison to Princess Diana was both the highest compliment their father could give and an acknowledgement of qualities that had sometimes created tension within the royal family. Diana's emotional openness and willingness to break royal protocols had been both her greatest strength and a source of institutional concern. "He wants to see you," William continued. "Not for an official meeting, not with advisors and private secretaries. He wants to have dinner. As a father, he said it has been too long since he has spoken with his son rather than managing a difficult situation." Harry felt tears welling up despite his attempts to maintain composure. The possibility of genuine reconciliation with his father had seemed remote for so long that he had stopped allowing himself to hope for it. Yet here it was, offered through William in a conversation that had begun with professional acknowledgement and evolved into something much more personal.
What about everything that has happened?
"The interviews, the book, the things I said about Camilla?" Harry asked, referring to the various public statements that had created significant controversy and damaged relationships. "He said something tonight that I have never heard him say before," William replied. "He said that he would rather have an honest son who disagrees with him than a silent son who pretends to agree. He said your honesty tonight made him realize how much he has missed having real conversations with you." This was almost too much for Harry to process. The idea that his father valued authenticity over agreement contradicted years of Harry's assumptions about royal expectations and family dynamics. "Where is this coming from, William? Why now?" Harry asked. "Because we almost lost you," William said, his voice breaking slightly. "Not just to California or to different priorities, but really lost you. And tonight, watching you speak about struggling with grief and trauma, about feeling like you had no right to ask for help, Harry, we failed you. As a family, as an institution. We failed you when you needed us most." The admission was devastating in its honesty. Harry had spent years feeling like the problem, like the family member and could not adapt to expectations and requirements. To hear William acknowledge institutional failure rather than personal inadequacy was transformative. "I made mistakes too," Harry said quietly. "I said things publicly that should have been said privately first. I let my pain become a weapon instead of a bridge." "We all made mistakes," William agreed. "But maybe it is not too late to fix them. Maybe tonight showed us that our family works best when we are honest about our struggles rather than pretending they do not exist." Harry looked across the reception area where Meghan was still engaged in animated conversation with charity representatives. She caught his eye and smiled, somehow sensing that something important was happening. Her support and encouragement had made tonight possible, and whatever came next would depend on her continued understanding. "Meghan would need to be part of any conversation," Harry said firmly. "She is my family now, and any relationship with me includes a relationship with her." "Father mentioned that specifically," William replied. "He said he wants to get to know his daughter-in-law properly, without the pressure of official duties or media scrutiny. Catherine feels the same way." The evening that had begun with an unexpected appearance at a charity event was evolving into something that could reshape royal family relationships fundamentally. Harry felt simultaneously hopeful and cautious, aware that good intentions could still founder on practical realities and ingrained patterns.
What happens next? Harry asked.
Next week, if you are willing. Highgrove, just family, no staff beyond what is absolutely necessary for security. Catherine is organizing it like a normal family dinner, nothing formal or official. William paused. Harry, I know this is complicated, and I know we have hurt each other. But I want my brother back.
We want our family back. Harry closed his eyes and felt the weight of years of pain and misunderstanding shifting slightly.
Not disappearing, but becoming manageable, containable within a larger context of love and shared history. I want that too, he said simply. Then we will make it happen. William replied with the kind of determination Harry remembered from their childhood when his older brother decided to fix something. Whatever it takes, however long it takes. The phone call ended with practical arrangements and expressions of hope that felt both fragile and essential. As Harry rejoined Meghan and the remaining guests, he realized that tonight had accomplished something he had not dared to hope for. It had reminded his family who he was beneath the controversy and conflict. The fourth part of this extraordinary evening was ending with possibilities that no one could have anticipated when the Duke and Duchess of Sussex first stepped out of their car at the Royal Albert Hall. The conversations that would follow in the coming weeks would determine whether tonight's breakthroughs could become lasting change. But for now, Harry and Meghan prepared to leave the venue where they had redefined their relationship with Britain, with the royal family, and with their own public roles. The night air outside would feel different from when they had arrived, charged with potential that had not existed a few hours earlier. 6 months after that transformative evening at the Royal Albert Hall, the world looked different for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. The changes had not happened overnight, and they had not been without challenges, but the foundation laid that night had proven strong enough to support a new chapter in their lives and their relationship with the royal family. The family dinner at Highgrove had taken place exactly 1 week after the charity gala, as William had promised. It had been awkward at first, with years of hurt feelings and public disagreements creating invisible barriers around the dinner table. But gradually, as the evening progressed and the conversation turned from careful pleasantries to more substantial topics, the healing had begun. King Charles had surprised everyone by asking Meghan directly about her experience with mental health advocacy in the United States. Her thoughtful, detailed response about the systemic barriers facing underserved communities had led to a 2-hour discussion about mental health policy that engaged everyone present. By the end of the evening, they were planning collaborative projects rather than simply trying to repair damaged relationships. The public response to news of the family reconciliation had been mixed, as everyone expected. Some saw it as a positive development that demonstrated the possibility of healing and growth. Others viewed it with skepticism, wondering whether the changes were genuine or merely strategic. But for Harry and Meghan, the opinions of strangers mattered less than the reality they were building with their family. Today, Harry stood in the same spot at the Royal Albert Hall where he had delivered his impromptu speech 6 months earlier. But the circumstances were entirely different. He was here for the launch of a new mental health initiative that bore the unlikely name Royal Bridges, a joint project between the Sussex Foundation, the Prince and Princess of Wales Foundation, and several established mental health charities. The name had been Meghan's suggestion, reflecting the evening when Princess Anne had spoken about family being built on shared values rather than just blood relations. The program focused on creating connections between individuals struggling with mental health issues and trained peer supporters who had walked similar paths. Elizabeth Hartwell, whose charity had been the catalyst for the remarkable evening 6 months ago, served as the program's director. Her organization Mind Forward had grown exponentially since that night, receiving funding and support that had allowed them to expand their community-based programs across the UK. More importantly, the model they had developed was being replicated in communities around the world. The launch event today was smaller than many royal gatherings, intentionally designed to focus on the people the program was meant to serve rather than on celebrity or media attention. Representatives from mental health organizations, peer counselors, and individuals who had benefited from mental health support filled the hall's lower levels, while family members and supporters occupied the balconies. Prince William and Catherine had arrived early, spending time meeting with program participants and learning about their experiences. William's comfort with these conversations had grown remarkably over the past months, influenced by Harry's example and his own commitment to authentic engagement with mental health issues. Catherine, meanwhile, had become one of Meghan's closest collaborators on the project. Their working relationship had surprised many observers, but those who knew them well understood that their shared commitment to child welfare and family support created natural common ground. The tensions that had dominated headlines during the Sussex departure had given way to a productive partnership focused on meaningful work. King Charles was scheduled to speak at today's event, but his remarks would be brief and focused on the substantive impact of the program, rather than family dynamics or royal reconciliation. He had learned, partly through his conversations with Harry and Meghan, that effective advocacy required keeping the focus on the people being served rather than on the advocates themselves. As guests settled into their seats, Harry reflected on how different this felt from that spontaneous evening 6 months ago. Tonight was planned, organized, and carefully coordinated, but the authenticity that had made his impromptu speech so powerful remained at the heart of what they were trying to accomplish. Meghan joined him at the side of the stage, her presence as calming and encouraging as it had been that first night. She wore a simple blue dress that echoed the colors of both the British and American flags, a subtle acknowledgement of the transatlantic nature of their work and their lives. "Ready?" she asked quietly, taking his hand as she had that first evening. "More than ready," Harry replied, and meant it. The nervousness he had felt 6 months ago had been replaced by confidence born of experience and success. They had learned that their authentic voices could create positive change, and that lesson had transformed how they approached their public roles. Dr. Hartwell took the stage to welcome everyone and provide context for the program they were launching. Her introduction was warm but focused, emphasizing the evidence-based approach that gave Royal Bridges credibility beyond its famous founders. 6 months ago, in this very hall, we witnessed something extraordinary, she began. We saw what happens when people in positions of influence choose authenticity over image, connection over protocol, and service over self-interest. Tonight, we launch a program built on those same principles. She outlined the structure of Royal Bridges, explaining how trained peer supporters would be matched with individuals seeking mental health support based on shared experiences and mutual understanding. The program emphasized ongoing relationships rather than one-time interventions, recognizing that mental health recovery was a journey rather than a destination. When Dr. Hartwell introduced Harry and Meghan, the applause was warm and sustained, but it felt different from the surprised enthusiasm of 6 months ago. This was appreciation for work done and results achieved, rather than simply excitement about unexpected appearances. Harry spoke first, his remarks brief and focused on the individuals who would benefit from the program. He told the story of Marcus, the young man from Birmingham who had approached him that first night, and how their ongoing conversations had helped shape the design of Royal Bridges. "Marcus taught me that healing happens in relationship," Harry said. "Not in isolation, not through individual strength alone, but through genuine connection with people who understand your struggles, because they have walked similar paths." He described how the program would work in practical terms, emphasizing the training and support that peer counselors would receive, the safeguards in place to protect both supporters and participants, and the ways success would be measured over time. Meghan followed with remarks about the international dimension of the program, explaining how partners in the United States, Canada, and Australia were adapting the model to their own communities and cultural contexts. Her background in international advocacy was evident as she discussed the challenges and opportunities of cross-cultural mental health support. "Mental health struggles may be universal, but the solutions must be culturally responsive," she said. "What works in London may not work in Los Angeles, and what succeeds in Sydney may need adaptation for Toronto. But the principle of peer support, of healing through human connection, transcends these differences." When King Charles took the stage, his remarks were personal, in a way that would have been unthinkable before the family reconciliation. He spoke about his own struggles with anxiety during his early years as heir to the throne, and how isolation had made those challenges more difficult to manage. "My son taught me something important 6 months ago," he said, looking directly at Harry in the audience. "He reminded me that vulnerability is not weakness, but the foundation of strength. Tonight, we launch a program built on that understanding." The King's speech was brief, but its impact was profound. His willingness to acknowledge his own mental health struggles, and to credit Harry with teaching him important lessons about authenticity, represented a fundamental shift in royal communication about personal issues. As the formal program concluded and guests moved to the reception area, the atmosphere was celebratory but purposeful. Conversations focused on the practical implementation of Royal Bridges, the communities it would serve, and the potential for expansion. Marcus, the young man whose story had influenced Harry 6 months ago, approached the couple during the reception. He was now training to become a peer supporter himself, having found in his own healing journey the foundation for helping others. "I wanted to thank you again," he said to Harry, "not just for listening to me that night, but for showing me that my struggles could become my strength." Harry smiled, remembering the nervous young man who had approached him after that first speech. The confidence and purpose Marcus now displayed illustrated exactly what royal bridges hoped to achieve. "You did the hard work," Harry replied. "We just created a platform for it." As the evening wound down and guests began departing, Harry and Meghan stood once again in the space where their journey back to Britain had begun. The circular hall looked the same, but everything else had changed. Their relationship with the royal family had been rebuilt on foundations of mutual respect and shared purpose. Their public roles had evolved from reactive responses to criticism into proactive leadership on issues they cared about deeply. Their marriage had been strengthened by navigating challenges together and emerging with clearer understanding of their shared values and goals. Most importantly, they had learned that authenticity was not just personally liberating, but professionally effective. The work they were doing now reached more people and achieved more meaningful impact than anything they had accomplished through traditional royal duties. Hartwell joined them as they prepared to leave, her face glowing with satisfaction at the evening's success and excitement about the work ahead. 6 months ago, I thought we were organizing a simple charity fundraiser, she said, shaking her head in amazement. Instead, we launched a movement. You created the space for it, Meghan replied. We just filled it with honesty. As they walked toward the exit, Harry reflected on the unpredictable path that had led them to this moment. 6 months ago, their decision to attend a mental health charity event had been spontaneous, driven by personal conviction rather than strategic planning. Tonight, they were leaving as leaders of an international mental health initiative, with the full support of their family and the resources to create lasting change. The autumn air outside felt crisp and full of possibility, just as it had 6 months earlier. But now, instead of uncertainty about what their return to Britain might mean, they carried confidence about what they were building together. Their car waited at the same spot where they had arrived for that first, transformative evening. As they settled into their seats for the journey home, Harry took Meghan's hand and squeezed it gently. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For believing this was possible before I did. For supporting my decision to speak that night. For helping me remember who I wanted to be." Meghan smiled, the same expression of love and pride he had seen from the audience 6 months ago when he first took the stage. "We did this together," she replied, "and we will keep doing it together." As their car pulled away from the Royal Albert Hall, the building's distinctive dome was illuminated against the London sky, a beacon of history and possibility. Inside its walls, the echoes of the evening's conversations would fade, but the impact of what had been launched would continue growing. The story that had begun with an unexpected appearance at a charity gala had evolved into something none of them could have anticipated, a new model for royal service based on authenticity, collaboration, and genuine human connection. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex had found their way back to Britain, to their family, and to meaningful work that honoured both their privileges and their principles. The Royal Albert Hall had witnessed many historic moments over its long history, but the events of these 2 evenings, 6 months apart but forever connected, would be remembered as the moment when the royal family learned that their greatest strength lay not in maintaining traditional distances, but in bridging the gaps between privilege and struggle, between duty and humanity, between the crown and the people it served. As Harry and Meghan's car disappeared into the London traffic, the building stood ready for whatever history would bring next, its walls having absorbed the echoes of transformation and the promise of continued change.